It was just Canada Day recently, so I had to talk to one of the other great Canadian YouTubers out there. Maddie Hipoya is here, and I'm so glad you are. Hey, Maddie.
Hey, how's it going? Finnish Canadian. Finnish Canadian.
For any non-Canadians, the distance between the east and west of Canada is enormous. Like, I think some people underestimate how big of a country this is. But I know you've spent time out here as well. I've seen it on your Instagram. And I know actually, like a total coincidence, you and I were both shooting around like Lake Louise, and I was at Sunshine and you were at Lake Louise like on the same day. And we were both shooting like cinematic iPhone videos. Totally unrelated, like full coincidence. I was shooting for Polar Pro and you were just showing off the iPhone. And yeah, it was just really cool.
That's so funny. You should have messaged me or something. I had no idea.
They're still like 40 minutes away, so I wouldn't have run into you. But yeah, no, I mean, that's the nice thing about where I am. It's kind of like where a lot of tourists come. A lot of the time, people only know about Calgary because of Banff and the mountains. And then, yeah, I mean, Toronto is like the major international hub of Canada, where most people from other countries will have had the most interactions with Toronto.
It's funny. I'm always like, you should come to Canada, but not Toronto. Toronto's like kind of boring. Like to me, it's so like normal and just like there's not like I'm into the nature stuff and epic, beautiful scenery, and Toronto doesn't really have that.
Yeah, well, you got some pretty nice stuff there, but it's true.
It's different.
We're spoiled over here, but like let's start that for anybody that isn't already familiar with your YouTube channel. You love to travel, you love to shoot beautiful things. What is your background in video production before the YouTube stuff that I saw? Like, how did you just arrive on YouTube shooting beautiful B-roll and these cinematic videos?
Yeah, it's funny because like my channel, I was super lucky, I think, with timing. So my channel blew up pretty quickly. Like my first tutorial ever is like, I think it's still my most viewed video right now. But people don't see the like 7, maybe 8 years of filmmaking and learning that happened before that. So I actually, I studied a couple years of kinesiology, sports science, whatever you want to call it, in university. And I was like, I don't know, like this is all right, but maybe there's something better. And then I ended up going back to Finland, and I actually spent 5 years in Finland. And during that time, I was actually studying at a Bible college, and I somehow just started watching tutorials on filmmaking. I don't even know why. I was watching literally tutorials on After Effects. That's what I started with. It just interested me for some reason. And then I started making little videos. At first it was for my church, and then it was like little skate videos, and then it was wedding videos, and then it kind of just grew from there. Like me and my brother started buying some gear, and we're like, well, maybe we should make some money from this since we have all this expensive gear, what we thought was expensive back then.
It felt expensive at the time.
Yeah, it felt very expensive. And for some people, I'm sure it still is. But now compared to what I have, obviously different thing. Anyways, so yeah, we started shooting weddings. That was like our first way to actually make money from it. And yeah, it just kept going from there. One thing led to another. We were shooting little commercials. And then I ended up moving back to Toronto in 2012 because of my now wife. Also evading the army. I don't know if we want to talk about it. In Finland, they have like a mandatory 6 months that you have to do for army, and I hadn't done it. Usually you do it when you're 18, and I wasn't in Finland then, so I never did it. And then they're like, if you're gonna stay here, you got to go to the army. I was like, peace. I'm going back to Canada. And then that's when I started working full time, producing videos for a church at first, and then freelancing a little bit on the side. And then eventually went full-time freelance, and then I started dabbling in like, a little bit bigger commercials. I was starting to shoot stuff for Nike and San Pellegrino and Energizer and these bigger companies. Nothing, they weren't like their main campaigns or anything yet, but I was making a really good income from it. And yeah, that's kind of how it all started. How that led me to YouTube, I don't know if you want to talk about that. Is that interesting?
Well, one interesting point here is that there's a ton of stuff we have in common in what we do and what we're interested in, that like, we love like video and photography and tech. And then a big difference I noticed is that you kind of had this, you had mentioned this on the Golden Hour podcast I was listening to just before this, that you had, kind of wanted to get away from client work a little bit and wanting to do, like, the idea of YouTube and having the freedom to talk about whatever you want is really appealing to you, and you would rather not do so much client work. Whereas I totally feel like I'm the opposite boat. That, like, I love doing client work, and I don't want to have to choose between the two of them. And what is it about that? Like, what makes you prefer doing YouTube stuff, or not so much want to do something for a client?
So it's not really the client, it's the way freelancing works. So freelancing, you're always waiting on somebody else to pay you or to give you work. So like, you might be a really hard worker, but you might just not be getting work that month. So like, it's really all over the place. One month you might have a ton of work, and then the next month you don't have much. And then like, people might think like, oh, that's awesome, you get a bunch of time off, but it's never really time off, because you're always kind of waiting for that call for the next Nike shoot next week or something like that. They just like all of a sudden spring on you. And so you kind of always want to be available. So I didn't like that. And then I noticed that the bigger the productions got, so I was usually a director of photography, a DP, kind of in charge of the camera department. And the bigger the production got, the smaller my say, the less my creativity mattered in a way. Like, I just basically got slotted in for that one role. And then above me, there would be the client, then there would be the agency, and then there'd be these creatives who had these ideas, and then there'd be a director under them. And then it would be me, director of photography. And so by the time it got to me, I'd have very little say in like the idea or how it should be edited or color graded or any of those things. And so I'd shoot something and I'd be like, oh, I'd be super pumped on the footage. And then I'd see the end product and I'd be like, I probably would have done things pretty differently. So that was the big thing. And then I did want more freedom to be able to film the kinds of things that I wanted to film. I've always been fascinated with documentaries. And so that was kind of like, I realized that shooting commercials and stuff wasn't going to get me to filming documentaries. Like, none of those guys were going to pay me all of a sudden to film a documentary. And so that's when I started to think about passive incomes, how to like make the freelancing more consistent, or the income more consistent every month, and then not having to rely on other people to give me work. So then I started playing with passive incomes, and then I realized, okay, that works, but it'll be even better if I have an audience. And so that's when I started to do YouTube, with the goal in mind that someday I would be able to build my own brand, my own company, that then I could use that to film the things that I want to film. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. The things that, I mean, right now, I think we can especially feel the utility of having diversified an income. That feeling of like waiting around for the phone to ring when you're a freelancer. I think we can all relate to that a little bit more right now than usual. Like, you know, once the whole economy kind of came to a halt for a while, I know there's a lot of people in production that suddenly were just waiting for things to get started again. But as independent creators, like, you know, when we're making YouTube videos, that means we can just decide, hey, I've got an idea for a video. I'm just going to make it, you know? And I think there's a lot of people that I saw even take it as an opportunity to create more of their own work and double down on certain things. I mean, even having this podcast, like creating it as a video podcast as well, was only possible because I kind of had a little bit of extra time thanks to the pandemic. But even though we're in like a really exceptional moment, these general rules are always at play, that if you rely completely on any one source of income, you're at a lot more risk. You know, I just think it's so valuable, especially if you're in a freelance type situation. It's so important to be able to bring in money from multiple places so that if one slows down, another can pick up. The worst situation, and you know, I've known so many photographers and filmmakers that are in this spot where they have one big client and they are still freelance, but everything depends on that one client always coming through. And then if something changes, you know, a new art director comes in and they want to go in a different direction, all of a sudden, you know, where are you? That's a pretty big challenge. So yeah, I mean, I'm totally on the same page in terms of having multiple things to do. The only difference is I like working for a client. Like, I like I like having somebody else pull together a bigger team to make something that's more like technically challenging than I could just pull off on my own, you know?
Right. Yeah. I fully agree with that. Like the maximizing revenue streams has always been my idea, is like having as many revenue streams as possible so that I can do client work. And I actually like doing client work. Like I love working with brands like Epidemic Sound, who just like give us kind of like full creative control to make whatever we want to make. That's super, super cool. But I also wanted to get to a point where I never have to rely on that. So for example, this pandemic happens, like I've been totally fine financially. Yeah, it's gone down a little bit, but like as long as I just keep making videos, I'm good. So I like that freedom. And then there's the other aspect of, and I don't, this may sound arrogant in some ways, but before it was like the client, whatever big company, and then way, 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 way down is like me as a DP. And now because I have my own brand, I'm kind of like closer to the same level, even though obviously I'm not a big company like the other big companies I used to work with or work for. But there's more of an equal footing, and so that means that they respect what I do more, and they give me more creative freedom also. So that's what I really enjoy about this whole YouTube world and the way that we do things. But that being said, I do also miss doing those bigger productions, which is a lot harder, I think, to pull off in this YouTube world. But it's something that I think I'm starting to go towards in this next year or two.
One thing that I struggle with is scaling up and down productions, doing YouTube stuff versus client work. So, for example, like you're shooting on a pretty big camera right now. You've got a C500, and you work with other like real cinema cameras. Do you find it harder or more cumbersome to shoot with that on your own when you're doing YouTube stuff? Like, do you ever want to just pick up the EOS R and never pick up another cinema camera? Like, why do you keep using the big cameras even though they're a little slower to operate and stuff?
I feel bad because I have a C300 and a C300 Mark II and a C500 Mark II, and I like right now for the last like couple months I've barely used them. So there's an interesting thing with YouTube where, especially now, I'm doing a lot, like pretty much every video is like more vlog style, and sure, you could try to do it with like a C500 and it'd be a bit of a nightmare with how big it is and stuff, but you could pull it off. But YouTube, there's a sense of like rawness, and it feeling real and genuine. And if it's too slick, if it looks too good, then it kind of takes away from that. So I think a lot about like what's the best tool for that video. So if I'm just doing like a tutorial at the office sitting down and like I'm basically going to be just one angle, then I want the best quality and I want it to look really good then, because I want to be able to hold the viewer's attention better. But if I'm going to be doing a more of a vlog style review of a camera or something, then I'm just going to shoot it on the EOS R because it still looks great, but it's easier to work with and it has more of that like YouTube feel, if that makes sense to you.
Well, what do you shoot on when you're doing the vlog stuff? Is that on the R? And also what are the basic profile settings? Do you shoot in log or do you just shoot in the default rec color spaces or what?
So I've been using the EOS R, which is hilarious because I think I've been using it since it came out, and we got so much. Me and Peter McKinnon, one of my best friends, we got so much flack from people when we switched over, and they're like, "How could you? Like that camera's garbage."
Sure.
Like
I remember that.
like specs wise, it's so lackluster. But then when you start using it, you're like, "Okay, this image is really nice." And so I'm constantly doing like a balancing act of like, okay, it's YouTube and it doesn't need to be slick, but I also want it to look really good. So I shoot in C-Log. I have I have ND filters so I can shoot at the right shutter speed. I do all of that stuff, and I'm really picky about colors and stuff, even though I don't have the time always to be as picky as I want to be. So I try to make it convenient for myself that I can. So right now, for example, I'm basically daily vlogging, but weekdays only. I'm taking the weekends off just to keep myself sane, not burn out and all that. And so I'm filming and editing a video every single day. And so I need to streamline some things and make them faster. But at the same time, I don't want to just go all auto on my camera and Rec 709 and all that stuff because I care about quality.
Yeah, it's constantly a struggle to find that balance of how do I keep this easy enough that I'm not slowing myself down, but still make it look good enough. And yeah, I mean, even that decision between like, when do you shoot 4K? When do you shoot 1080? When's it worth it? You know, there's a constant struggle.
I shoot every video in 1080. Sometimes if I'm like right now, I'm on the C500. If I was filming a talking head, I might do it in 4K, but I film almost everything in 1080 and then you just export and upload it in 4K. And trust me, most people will never, ever notice the difference. I did a test. I did EOS R 720, 1080 footage and 4K footage. And even looking at the raw files, none of the people that I showed could tell the difference.
Well, so here's the thing that bugs me about the R, and I saw your test and I totally agree. Like, it's really hard to spot the difference. What I've started to realize though, where the difference is between full frame and cropped on the R, because the full frame image is it's much, much softer than when you crop, which the 4K is also cropped. So if you're comparing the crop to the crop, then the 1080, yeah, it looks like exactly the same. But it kind of drives me crazy that whenever I shoot full frame, it is softer. Like, it's not bad. It's still really nice footage, but I just wish it looked as good as when it was cropped. That's my nitpicking on it.
Yeah, it's like I think Canon's always had a softer look to it. Like even the cinema cameras look much softer.
My C200 is very soft.
Yeah, and I think that's like in the end, that's actually more of a natural look. I think a lot of cameras are just way too sharpened, and like we've kind of gotten used to that in a way, but it's like I would rather have more detail than sharpness. And so I feel like the EOS R and the Canon cinema cameras, they have a lot of detail, and then you can add however much sharpness you want to it in post. So I don't really worry about that, but I am pumped on the R5. I'll probably switch over to that as soon as that comes out.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about once there's new Canon announcements this year. This is it's weird because the whole world did slow down, but there are still some crazy, amazing announcements this year. There's a lot of really good stuff coming. I do want to cover some of them that already just happened. On the last episode of this show, I spent basically the whole time talking to Stephen Hackett about the keynote, like both the production of it, because the video production was beautiful.
Oh, it was incredible.
And then also everything about the transition to ARM processors. So, because my mind is still very stuck in that world of that transition, but I didn't end up talking about almost anything else, which, you know, it was still a normal keynote where there's software announcements and there's updates that came out and there's other things that will start affecting our lives right away. Even if you don't buy a new computer, the nice thing about the iOS upgrades or the Mac OS upgrades is it just feels like you got a new computer or a new phone. Like, especially in the case of the phone, whenever I move to the next OS, sometimes I forget I didn't just buy a new phone because it can be such a different experience.
Yeah, I feel like hardware wise, we've kind of hit like a bit of a plateau in a way. I feel like phones aren't changing that much hardware wise, but then the software is changing a lot more. And so, yeah, you're right. Like that makes it feel like a new phone when you just update the software. That's kind of the same. Also, I bought a Tesla last year. And one of my favorite things about it is that you get software updates and all of a sudden, like your car feels new, like it's changing all the time. And so it never really starts to feel like an old car that you just get used to and kind of take for granted. It's weird.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason that the Tesla is the first car that like tech reviewers have been interested in, and the first car that, you know, like I'm curious about like the specs because it's becomes a bit more of a tech product. And I think that's actually going to become more and more common. Like I think because Tesla did it so well, I think other brands are going to be picking it up.
100%.
But since the last podcast, I did install iOS 14 on my phone. I have the beta running, so I
haven't done it yet. How is it?
It is shockingly stable. Last year was awful. I don't know if you remember. Like I don't know if you ran the beta, but last year's beta was really it was very unstable. I just recommend against it. It was not a very safe situation. Your phone would crash a lot. And even when the full version of iOS came out, again, it was one of the less stable releases. This version, iOS 14, from the developer beta, which, like, keep in mind, this is the early one, right? This isn't meant for mainstream public. I've had almost no issues, like occasional crashes. I'd say it crashes maybe like 10 to 20% more often. So I notice it. Like, it's a little bit more, but it's totally fine. Like, I've been surviving just fine. And the improvements are pretty great. I mean, okay.
I'm always curious when there's new stuff. There's like, I always get excited about everything. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And then you use it. And then there's things that you realize that like, or you were excited about that like just don't work in practice. Like you just don't end up using them. It's not easier. It doesn't solve the issue. And then there's things that you didn't realize were going to be a big deal. And you're like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. Like the way I use my phone. So what are those things for you?
Well, a lot of people end up in the situation where there are those things that totally change the way they use their phone, but then they get used to it so fast that they forget it ever was a change and they're just waiting for the next one. I'm like, this is the problem with modernity is we just can't appreciate what we have for 5 minutes. But yeah, okay.
True.
The best things so far, the best things like the simplest of being able to hide my extra app screens. Like I used to put a lot of effort into trying to organize all of the folders of, page 2 and page 3 so that my most important apps were on the first screen and then everything else was somewhere logical. But then I'd get behind on organizing and things would start just filling up further and further into extra screens until I'd put in the effort of either deleting apps or moving them into folders. Now there's this final page on the right side, the app library that auto sorts all your apps for you, which, sounds pretty great. The biggest benefit though, isn't actually browsing that area. I found like I still don't end up going in there very often. It's just being able to delete everything else. It's just not seeing all the other apps. And then I just search for whichever one I'm trying to use.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm such a digital hoarder that like, when I saw that, I was like, I don't know. But then I was like, oh wait, yeah, that makes my phone way cleaner, like way nicer. And I don't have to feel bad about not being like you and organizing my second, third, fourth page on my phone.
It lets you be a hoarder and you don't have to feel bad about it anymore. And then there's also the widgets was the other big thing. I kind of need to see the real developer widgets come out to get a sense of how this is going to be really useful. So the way I've set it up right now is I just put a big one at the top. So for one thing, the best thing that does to me is it pushes all my icons down towards my thumb. Like it's always bothered me that the default on an iPhone is the top. That's where gravity is backwards and all the apps want to move upwards. But that's further to reach when you're actually using it. So putting a big widget at the top lets you bump all the other things down. And for me, that's been right now it's the Maps widget because I just find, I don't know, it gives me a huge click space if I want to launch it and direct somewhere to go. I'm kind of giving Apple Maps more of a try again. I'd been defaulting to Google Maps for a long time. And it's because of the interface. I just really like the usability of Apple Maps is really well designed. Sometimes it still is sometimes missing. The place I noticed is we were hiking yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. And the trail we were on was in Google and it wasn't in Apple. It's like, okay, right. These are very, very small trails. But it's a difference. But when it comes to normal directions like streets and walking and buses and biking, I found Apple does the same job at this point for me. So
yeah, I remember trying Apple Maps probably a couple of years ago, and it didn't have the same amount of information, and so I just ended up going back to Google Maps. But then I'm curious now if they're starting to ramp up things again. Like you said, if the experience of using it is better, then maybe it is time to try it again.
It's stuff like being able to have that widget now that's new. The fact that it can take over your full lock screen. So if you're driving, you don't have to unlock your phone to see the directions of where you're going. And the interface is just faster. So the best example is if I'm somewhere else and I want to get home, it's like one tap in Apple Maps that's just show me the directions home, and it instantly does it. Whereas Google, it's a few more presses. I often mispress more often. I don't know, stuff like that.
Yeah. Totally get it. It's like the same thing on my Tesla. It's just swipe down on the navigate button and then you're going home or to the office. It just kind of like alternates.
Yeah.
If you're at home, it'll go to the office. If you're at the office, it'll go home, or anywhere else, it'll go home. Yeah, it's those small things in the end that make a big difference.
Well, we're on the topic of iOS. What are some of your favorite apps? Like, what do you use for photo and video all the time?
It's funny. Like, so actually, this is the first, I think this past year is the first year. Well, ever since I got the 11 Pro is the first year that first time that I've really used the iPhone in my videos more. So because I'm doing vlog style, I can get away with a little bit more also. But it's just so handy to pull out, like, instead of, if I'm going out with the family, instead of carrying my big EOS R, big microphone and GorillaPod, just taking my iPhone with me. And most people cannot tell the difference anymore. If I shoot on the 11 Pro with the ultra wide, I always use the ultra wide camera lens just because I think it's different enough, it's wide enough for vlogging. It works really well. Every time I post a story, I get at least a few DMs from people asking like, "What camera are you using for these stories?" And I'm just like, every time it's the iPhone. And then so I've been trying all the different like filmmaking apps, like Filmic Pro, and Moment came out with one. And honestly, I've always just had issues with all of them. They don't work as cleanly as I'd like them to be. I think a lot of it is just the UI. But then also just like weird issues with like files or frame rates being weird, or stabilization not being on, or HDR. And I wish I had control over HDR in video, that I could say that's always on or always off. And so recently I actually ended up doing a brand deal for this company called ProTake, mainly because the UI is so much easier, and then it makes it really easy to use presets, color looks in there. So I've been using that a lot for my Instagram stories. For my YouTube, I just film on the native app and then I'll just color grade it in post. So I'm honestly, I'm kind of a minimalist in a lot of ways. So I don't use, there's probably so many different filmmaking apps and stuff that I could be technically using. And I always find myself just defaulting to the native camera app because it's so easy and quick to pull out.
Yeah, I'm often in the same boat. The one other that I'll go to kind of often is Spark Camera, because I can edit within it. So I shoot and edit in the same thing. But if I'm going to edit it into another video, like in Final Cut, then yeah, I almost all the time end up pulling out the default app. And for the exact same reason that you say, I mean, Filmic, I've always had this relationship of like, I want to use it more often, or an app like it that can record in a higher bit rate, be a little more predictable with exposure. Because, for example, one thing that still bothers me with video is I'll often still see flicker in like skies, for example, where nothing is flickering in real life. Like the environment is stable, but something in the exposure is changing its mind, like moment by moment. Like every half second, you'll see it go up and down in exposure a little bit.
I think that's the HDR too, like turning off and on sometimes. And that's why I was saying, like, I wish I could just say like, have it on all the time. Yeah. I just want it on because it looks like the biggest thing that I underestimate. It's funny. The last time I was in Banff with Peter, like a year and a half ago or something like that, 2 years ago, I made a video saying like why I hate smartphone filmmaking. And at that point I really did. I didn't enjoy it. I feel like the results were always pretty bad. And then now, fast forward, I love it. It's like everything has changed. And the biggest thing that I underestimated was software. I thought because the sensor size is so small, it'll never look anywhere as good as my EOS R, for example, which is a full frame. Sensor's massive in comparison. And then with software, they started adding things like HDR. So now the dynamic range is better than my cinema camera in some situations.
It kills me when insane. I pull up the phone and it looks way better. Like there are a few client jobs now where I was shooting the reference, like, we were just sort of storyboarding it with the iPhone, planning to shoot it on the big camera. And then we're like, why don't we just get an extra shot with the phone? And I've used it because it did look better. And it was situation. The most obvious situation is it was inside of a room pushing out towards a window. And I'm like, look, like we don't have enough lights to see it. We couldn't possibly see inside this room and see outside. But on the iPhone, it's trivial. Like that's the default on the iPhone. It just looks, you see the blue sky, you see the person inside. And yeah, shooting RAW on a cinema camera, it's like, no, outside is pure white or it's pure black. I mean, not even close. And even with still photography, actually, like raw photos out of what's my main camera called? The 5D Mark IV, the 5D4 or the R, which are the same sensor anyway. But also the Sonys as well, out of the other four, the A7 A7R4. Yeah, same situation. Like the dynamic range isn't even close unless you really like push. You have to like massively underexpose it and push it really hard. But the reason it never quite catches up on big cameras is the tone mapping isn't as smart. So if you start, there might be more dynamic range in the file, but then you open up Capture One or Lightroom and you start dragging the shadows and highlights, it starts looking like an HDR photo because it's just bluntly bringing all the shadows up and all the highlights down, whereas the phone is recognizing like, okay, this part is a sky and it's perfectly isolated. And then the human face, they realize that that's a person and they bring it up a little. There's all those little details at work that you don't notice, but give you much better results. So.
And then not to mention like stabilization, even on the
God,
ultra wide, even though it's just electronic,
it's just software.
It's so
it's
good.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. And then like, I still thought like, okay, well, we can't get like shallow depth of field, but then now I don't know if it's going to be in the next iPhones or not, but with LiDAR, like they're going to be able to probably solve that issue too and make it really accurate. And have shallow depth of field even in video, and it'll look decent, I assume. So like I'm pumped on the things that smartphones are doing. Also because I feel like in order for companies like Canon with DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, in order for them to keep up, they're gonna have to also start doing software upgrades to their cameras
someday.
I think that's the only way they survive. Like they have to figure out ways to make their cameras smarter, just like smartphones are doing.
There was a recent episode of this show about which camera companies will survive the moment. And just a little update on that. Olympus is not going away, but yeah, it's being purchased and probably, who knows what. I mean, they say they're going to continue to develop the product, but I think a lot of people are going to write off Olympus, and I don't think it will not be a major player anymore. That's for sure. Which is sad. I mean, I love all these companies. They make such good products. But it's going to be a hard time for them they're going to have to really get competitive right now. So,
and I understand it. Like if me as a quote unquote professional filmmaker, I'm using my iPhone sometimes, like how much more the normal person who isn't doing it for their profession just wants like high quality video or photos. Like it's just so much easier to use their smartphone than to have a beefy mirrorless camera.
Oh yeah, by a mile. And I just also wanted to say one more time for the stabilization. It's so good on a phone that like I'll often get people commenting on stories, for example, or times that I'm just shooting on just an iPhone in my hand, and they'll say like, "Which gimbal did you use for that?" Or like, "That was a gimbal shot, right?" It's like, no, that's just what iPhones look like all the time. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's incredible.
Let's get back to some of the announcements, though. I don't want to. By the way, anybody listening, I was trying to make a YouTube video that day responding to WWDC, and I had basically a job came up before I could fit. So the video was like almost finished, and then I had to work out a job and couldn't finish the video. And then by the time I came back to it, I'm like, well, it's not really news anymore. So anyway, so this is it. This is the coverage instead.
The nature of YouTube. If you're not first, then you're too late.
And the challenge that I have compared to you, I mean, because my wife and I run like a production company as much as we do internet creation stuff. So
are you guys 50-50 or?
I always describe it as
much?
Like thirds, because her social media stuff is sort of separate from mine because it's more targeted to like a female audience. So we'll work on her Instagram and blog doing fashion and lifestyle stuff. And then on mine, it's like tech and creative. And then clients is like another 30%. And it's pretty consistently, that's the split of how much we work on what.
going back to our earlier conversation, is that by choice, or you just haven't wanted to or haven't monetized your social media in a way to not have to do the freelance or the other work?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, we have not tried to move away from freelance. Like we like freelance, and like I would love to do bigger, like I always say, like the thing I would enjoy the most is like big commercials where they can just look amazing. But of course, at the same time, it's like if one of them started making so much more money than the others that it didn't make sense to do the others, obviously we would shift our attention. But it's also just where the income has happened to fall for a few years now. Like it's just been stable in that environment. We're like, cool, like that works, because as things shift, we also have something to work on all the time.
So once the companies are like, here's 50 grand for you to shoot your own commercial, are you gonna go full-time YouTube?
Well, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I'll let you know when I get there. YouTube's also, YouTube is still hard though, in a way, like because it's you know, it's right there in the name, because it's your face in it. And like, you need to have an idea that you think is worth sharing. You need to feel a different kind of confidence in what you're putting out there. And YouTube's the place that I have the least of that. Like I feel more confident hitting the record button on this podcast because I know I can just talk for an hour, and like I'm bound to have at least one good idea in all that time. But YouTube, it's like you have to be so focused in your good idea, right? You need like 5 minutes worth of cleverness that a lot of people are going to share. And if it's just a good idea but not a viral idea, nobody's going to share it. And if it's just a viral idea but you didn't get any good B-roll, nobody's going to watch it. Like everything has to come together in so many right ways that I find it's hard, because, well, it is. I mean, it is hard. Like YouTube's a hard thing to do. But I mean, I think you've been doing a good job by vlogging as well. That kind of breaks down some of the barriers.
Yeah. So I've kind of like, I've had a big mental shift in how I treat my channel and how I treat my career. So I think for me, I'm kind of at a place, I'm not a big spender in life. I don't need much money to live. And as I make more income, I'm not really using it for anything. So I'm thinking more about longevity and sustainability, and because I love doing what I'm doing. So I want to keep it like that. And so now I'm kind of treating my YouTube channel more as like a documentary project. Like I said, I love shooting documentaries. So now, instead of videos being separate little like entities, it's all part of this bigger documentary narrative that I'm now creating, and I'm just adding to it every day a little bit. And so through that, I'm thinking more about like, what do I actually want to do with my life? Like, what do I want to do today? Like, if you ask me to do this podcast, I'm no longer thinking, is it good for my channel? I'm thinking, is it something that I want to do today? Is that what I want to spend my time on? And if it is, I want to do it. If it isn't, then I'm not going to do it, even if it's good for my channel. And so now I'm like, okay, like I want to shoot some short films. So I've started to talk to some of my director friends that I haven't worked with for a long time, and thinking like, okay, is there some like short film that we could do together? Even if we're not getting paid to do it or anything, we're just doing it for fun. And then I can bring my audience along on that and teach them through that and show them what goes into making a short film or a feature maybe someday. And treat my life more like I want my channel to revolve around my life versus my life revolving around my channel.
I think that's a great way. I mean, I like the sound of that a lot. It sounds great. The challenge,
is it too idealistic?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, it's obviously it's working for you. The challenge I have is that feeling of, this is only other YouTubers might be able to relate to this, but is when you do something that's really like personal and sort of for yourself, and you know it's interesting, but it's going to be hard to get people to click on it. You're giving up the chance of this being a 1 million view video, because not a million, you're going to have a harder time getting 1 million people to like join in on your life story than on something more specific. I think like looking at most of your like 1 million view videos and like the top videos I've had, not many of them fall into like the vlog category or really just like and not even to call it a vlog, like personal storytelling.
Yep.
So it can work. It totally can happen, but it's way less likely for that to take off.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's you can look at my numbers and they're all like tutorials or something where I'm providing some value, the highest viewed videos. But at the same time, I kind of just like not that I'm completely over tutorials, but I'm also kind of bored of it. It's not challenging to me. I'm not learning through it. I'm just teaching. I'm just giving all the time. And so I feel like if I do that for 5 years or 6 years, there's going to be a time where I'm just like, I got nothing to give anymore. And I'm actually not that good at what I do anymore because I've just been focusing on like what I can give the whole time. And so this is kind of a season of like being a little bit more selfish and like self-development, I guess, and going back to the roots of like, I think what made my channel so successful in the beginning. And so I'm not worried if a video, like one of my vlogs might get 30,000 views and somebody might look at my channel size and be like, oh, that's so little. And then, you know, another vlog like my yesterday's vlog, I think it has already over 70,000 views in less than 24 hours. And I'm not worried about that. Like I'm not thinking about that. And I think YouTube, that's what makes YouTube like really hard, is that it's so easy to get caught up in the numbers and let the numbers and comments and people dictate what you do, which sounds reasonable, but it's actually not a good idea, because if the comments and the people's ideas were good, then they would be making those and they would be doing really well, which they're probably not. They're not making them for whatever reason.
Yeah, I never trust the comments in directing
Exactly.
content. Not a good idea.
Exactly. And then, you know, like, sure, it might be great to get 50 million views a month on your channel, but maybe 1 million views a month on your channel is actually more beneficial if it's a really tight-knit group, a specific demographic, that works for certain advertisers or works for certain products that you could put out there to help your audience more. So I think it's more of like figuring out what you want to do, what you enjoy doing, and then keeping that sustainable and figuring out how can I monetize that without always having to think about like, oh, I need to make a viral video, because that'll drive you nuts.
Yeah, I hate that up and down, which my channel is very about. Like, it's either, you know, my baseline is lower and then I get these spikes, but which I would much rather have just a stable, like a lower number, but that I can predict, which is part of what I like about the podcast. Just in terms of the audio numbers, I know exactly what it's going to be every week. Like much more than, I mean, the video numbers are nothing, but they are less predictable and can range by, you know, 10 times depending on the video. So I really like it when it's like, hey, we all know each other here and we come to hang out every week. So that is definitely the kind of community interaction I'd rather encourage.
But I think this might sound like it only applies to YouTubers, but it's when the feedback, when you're not getting that super positive feedback, which is essentially what numbers are, then people have the tendency to panic, and then they like change what they're doing, and then they panic and they just lose what you were known for or what you were good at, and you try to be like other people or try to do what that person's doing because they're getting a lot of praise or they're getting a lot of numbers for it, and that's when it gets like, that's when you're in, I think, in dangerous territory. And like what we don't see is like things like algorithms are changing all the time on YouTube, or trends are changing. So like maybe your filmmaking style isn't very trendy right now and nobody's really paying attention, but then next year it might be like the new big thing and everybody wants to work with you all of a sudden, or the algorithm on YouTube changes a little bit and all of a sudden your channel is getting millions of views every single video and you're growing like crazy. I think the main thing as creatives is to never let that dictate what you're going to do, or to stop you. That would be even worse, to stop you from doing what you do, which is what a lot of people do. They kind of just like, well, forget this. Like my videos aren't getting views anymore. Nobody's saying that my videos are good. So I'm just going to stop this. And then like, you're going to miss out 100% on whatever is coming in the future if you stop. Whereas if you just keep going, like guaranteed, you're going to get to do a lot of cool things that you could have never imagined.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a good example is that I've seen ideas like memes, like the idea of if you don't release 3 to 5 videos a week, the algorithm's going to forget about you and you're going to get lost. People held on to that idea for years after it was true. Like it's clearly not been the case for a long time. And there are still people out there that seem to think you need to be posting daily to be relevant. And, I think in a lot of cases, that's much more challenging to make that succeed in the algorithm these days. Like I think that is absolutely not where it is. But once people get an idea of what works, they will commit to it and remember it longer than it might actually be helping them produce some quality content,
I actually, you're so right. I think it's actually worse to post. Like if you were to do daily right now, it's actually worse. Every time I post a video and then I post another video about 24 hours later, that's what I'm doing right now, I noticed that last video kind of gets like cut short. Like it doesn't get pushed out anymore. It's now this new video that's getting pushed out. And so it might have gotten a lot more views if I didn't post for like 3-4 days after that.
I think a lot of the reason for this as well is the structure of the whole dynamic of the internet has shifted because of the rise of stories. First it was Snapchat, now it's Instagram, but people have somewhere else to get their fix of daily, right? So they've become less invested in the few great vloggers, like Casey. Casey's not even doing it now. And, so many other people that used to do amazing, Ben Brown, all these other great daily vloggers, really either stopped or slowed down a lot because it just didn't matter anymore. People were watching daily from all their friends instead of making a new friend on the internet. And that's not to say like, it's not dead. It's not, you're proof that like, there's still a way to do it and make it work. It's just not what it was. The structure has changed and you have to kind of realize it's something different now than it used to be.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated by vlogging, because like, that's really what got me into YouTube in the first place. Like I started watching people like Casey and then, other vloggers, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I saw like all this other stuff on YouTube through that. So I've done like a lot of thinking and researching, and like I do agree that like things like stories have changed things, but it's not the same. Like the connection that people felt with Casey Neistat, for example, or the inspiration they got from Casey I don't think it can ever be replaced by something like stories.
I think it is a loss. Like, even though I'm saying it's changed, I think it's a worse situation because even though, so you're watching the daily content from your friends and colleagues and people, so that is good. Like that's an advantage, but they don't care very much about making them good and telling a story. And that's the big loss. Whereas like if you watch Casey, even if you just watch his 1 10-minute video every day, you're watching great content in that time, like something very thoughtful and intentional. And every minute of it is packed full of infotainment. And if you're watching your friends from school, they're just a bunch of idiots and they're just, posting photos of their lunch and who knows, I don't know, like stories. The quality isn't the same.
If you want to get like pumped and inspired, all you got to do is just watch 5 Casey Neistat videos, and I guarantee you will feel like, oh man, I want to get out there and do something. That's just like, that's what you get out of those. And I think the only reason why things like daily vlogging really, there's a sustainability question. I don't think doing daily vlogs is ever sustainable. Like you need days off. People need a break. Like that was dumb.
I only did it once for 3 days and I was like, nope, not going to happen.
I did an experiment last summer. I did, I think 26 days straight. Wow. And I already noticed in that time, it not only, you don't notice that you're going to burn out because you're so pumped on it and you're constantly getting that like feedback loop of like views and positive comments and that kind of stuff. but it starts taking over your mind first. Like everything, you wake up and like everything is revolving around like, oh,
How
what
is
am I
this
going
part
to
of
do
the
today?
story?
What's the story today? What's the video that I'm making? So you need those breaks. But I think what drove it to that side was that like back then YouTube valued watch time so much. I think they like tweaked the algorithm a little bit, and like watch time, before that it was Charlie bit my finger and these kinds of videos. The most viewed videos would get suggested. And then they're like, okay, we want better quality content. So how do we measure that? Well, if people are watching a video for a long time, that must be quality content. Again, this is my theory here, but that's when watch time started to get really important. And that's when everybody started vlogging, and people that had big channels made a vlog channel, and that vlog channel became bigger than their actual primary channel. And that's what drove people to do things like daily, because it was working. People were getting so many views, whereas now it doesn't work anymore. People don't get tons of views for daily vlogs. There are some vloggers like Yoon Olsen, he still posts vlogs every once in a while. They get tons of views. But if you're starting out as a vlogger, like it's virtually impossible. But I miss the feeling of like seeing a new Casey Neistat video, for example, and knowing that like this is going to make me feel good, this is going to pump me up and inspire me, and having that as like a daily like thing. I really miss that. And so that's partly also why I've gone to this more like vlog style on my channel now.
Well, let's take this as a chance to spread some love. Who do you really like? Like, who are you watching lately that inspires you?
So there was a ton of channels that I was watching, and then I kind of just got bored of them. A lot of them were like in the filmmaking space, and then I just kind of, not to knock on anybody, but I kind of just feel like everybody's doing the same thing now. I don't think this is what people are doing, but it almost feels like people are just going through like Peter McKinnon's catalog of videos and be like, oh, I'll do that one today.
Right.
And they're like kind of doing the same thing in their own style, in their own personality, but it's the same video. It's the same topic. Like I've heard it a million times already. So now I'm way more drawn. For example, do you know Potato Jet?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Potato Jet, good friend of mine, love his channel, but I actually like his vlog channel. He started another channel that's his vlog channel, and I like his vlog channel more. Not that his main channel videos aren't great, they're awesome, but I love seeing, like, because I don't talk to him every day, I don't get to hang out with him every day, I love seeing what's happening in his life, and it's kind of like the behind the scenes to his channel. So I love content like that right now. That's what I want to see. I want those human connections, human interactions. Even channels like I never really understood David Dobrik before. I was like, I don't get this. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to force myself to watch a few, because like there's clearly something to this.
I did the
like,
same thing.
working.
I was like, this isn't filmmaking. It's not for me. And then I watched a few. I'm like, there's something here.
Yeah. And then I was like, what is this? I was just getting more and more entertained. And that's when I realized that like one of the biggest things, like, humans obviously want human interaction. We want, relationships. We want to see people. And so David Dobrik, like, he himself doesn't really do much, but he's just showing his friends all the time. And that's what makes it so great. It's like the interactions he has with his friends, the relationships that he has with people. That's what makes it so much fun to watch. And I think that's what Casey was too back in the day. He had all these characters, all these people that you learned to like. At first, you're like, who is this guy? But then after like the fifth time seeing him, you're like, oh, I love this guy. It's kind of like, I equate it to The Office. Like, you watch the first episode of The Office and you're like, this is the dumbest show I've ever watched. Like, I don't get it. This isn't funny. Yeah. And then you watch 10 episodes and you're like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Like, that's so Dwight. Like, Dwight would do that, And you start understanding the characters. And I think that's partly why I'm so drawn to this vlog style content again.
Yeah, it like creates this universe and this sitcom. And I got really sucked into Corridor. Corridor Crew for the last year or so. So I absolutely know that feeling. So I don't want to totally lose track of the Mac stuff, because I have something I just went into yesterday and that totally screwed me over and drove me crazy. So
we're just going on all sorts of tangents here.
Absolutely. That's what that's literally what a podcast is for. It's like, okay, a video has to be about something. Here We can go
I
anywhere we
love
want.
it.
I
Yeah.
tried to yesterday. I tried to install Big Sur on my iMac, and this is what made me realize it's too old. So the cutoff is 2014. Your machine has to be newer than 2014 for it to work. And mine
Nice.
is from late 2013, and I can't install it. No, it was very. I'm like, I didn't. My machine didn't feel old until now. It feels ancient and useless. But what do you actually? What do you edit on most of the time?
So I have like my main editing machine for the longest time was my iMac, and I'm pretty sure it's a 2013 also. Like I've had it forever,
Yeah.
and it still works
See? It was a
great.
good
Like,
year.
I have no issues. Yeah, no issues. But now I've been on the 16-inch MacBook because I've been doing this vlog style. I've tried to like keep things more fluid also, where again, my channel's not controlling me. So like if I'm at the cottage or I want to go travel with my family, it's not going to be like a disruption to my workflow. And so I've forced myself to start editing on my MacBook, and I love it. Like it powers through, no issues. Well, maybe issues with Premiere and programs like that, but like the laptop itself is great. And then I do have a Mac Pro, which I got at the end of last year, which unfortunately, or was it the beginning of this year, it has not been used much at all because of this whole Corona thing. I was really looking forward to making some more like I have this little documentary series called Being. The whole idea is like what is it like actually being somebody. Like I did the first one on Jesse Corgama. Jesse Driftwood is his online persona name.
I don't know if I
whatever.
knew his last name now that you say it out loud.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody thinks his last name is Driftwood, but it's not. And then I did one on Gene Potato Jet, and like I love making those. And then, like I said, I want to shoot more short films and maybe feature at some point. And so I was pumped to have the Mac Pro to do all that stuff. And a development that happened was that I actually fired, well, not really fired, but sort of fired my editor. So like
Watch the
I'm
video to
editing
learn
everything.
more.
Yeah. Clickbait, not clickbait. So yeah, things are changing, and I feel like I could probably go a little bit more minimalist right now.
Well, what are you editing with though? Are you in Final Cut now, or do you still go back and forth, or what's the?
So a couple weeks ago, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start doing Final Cut. Just I want to see what it's like. I was kind of getting fed up with some stuff in Premiere, and so I did at least a week or so of videos purely on Final Cut, and then a couple of days ago, I switched back to Premiere again just to see what it was like. And I gotta say, I'm enjoying Premiere again. I think I'm just so used to it. Like I'm just so fast.
It's hard.
on
It's
it.
hard to fight muscle memory like that, and switching is really hard.
And it's
to
just
anything.
it's tiny little things like the way that you import footage into Premiere versus Final Cut. It's a little bit different. Like when I just drag in my folders of my EOSR footage, my Mavic, whatever, they would come in as folders right away in Premiere. Whereas on Final Cut, I don't know if there's an option to change it, but like it gets sorted by days right away by default. And I was like, that's weird to me. Like I don't like that right now. It might be better, but for me it was weird.
I mean,
and so like,
it's all things where like you can do it almost exactly the same way. You just have to learn it, and learning all of those little steps is when you're working and trying to get a video out every day. That's not
hard.
what you want to spend your time doing. Sometimes, yeah, it can just be a big challenge.
I gotta say, Final Cut has gotten way better than when I used it last. Like it's really, really good. But yeah, I'm just
what's going to be
right now.
a breaking point in the future is if you saw during the keynote, now they already have Final Cut running on the new ARM Apple Silicon architecture, right? So all of a sudden, I think there's going to be a really hard line drawn between anything that's written optimized for Mac hardware and things that are not. So, meaning Adobe specifically is going to have it. All of it, like it already is a bit slower, right? Like I'm sure that's part of the reason you were interested in Final Cut in the first place is because like export times are way faster.
100%.
You can work with more 4K streams at once if you're doing multicam, or like it handles footage faster. That gap is going to massively widen once it's all running on Apple made from the ground up hardware, and then the software is written exactly for that hardware. And basically it's the olden days where there was like more of a, PC versus Mac rivalry. Cause I don't know. That doesn't even seem to exist anymore as far as I'm concerned. Like it really doesn't matter which computer you use.
I feel like with people in their minds, it still exists.
They don't listen. They don't listen to this show anyway, or I ban them in the comments if they try to. Okay, but because it just wasn't that real. Like you could do the exact same jobs on any hardware you want. It was never a limitation, and it was really a matter of preference. But I think we're about to get to this point where it's going to they'll become a more real difference. Like we don't know all of the repercussions of it, but one of the big things that I'm really hammering on that I just think this is one of the most interesting things that's about to happen is because you're going to be with Big Sur, you're going to be able to run, and I guess this would only be on the new computers. You're going to have an Apple Silicon computer, but you're going to be able to natively run your iOS apps, which are doing all of this crazy VFX stuff right now. Like you can download all these apps that do things that you'd have to actually learn After Effects to do. And then when you would render it out, it would take 2 hours to render it at 4K, but on your phone, it's doing it in real time while you're recording it. In terms of like, the filters in Instagram and in Snapchat, or there's like VFX apps where you can add explosions, or the types of like filters and image processing and titling and all this stuff that is way harder to do on a real computer is suddenly going to become like trivial because you're running an iPhone app of it. And that won't be available for any of Windows or Linux. And that will be a huge gap. Like that'll really change the incentive of like, why would you choose a PC or a Mac? Because it's not right now, all that you lose if you choose a Mac instead of a PC is like, okay, I can't use Final Cut. But if you already love Premiere, that's no loss, right? Like if you're in Premiere, it's like, okay, it's almost the same choice. There's some reasons to go to a PC. And it's not going to be that anymore, which makes it really interesting to like tech right now.
Oh yeah. I'm always curious about this stuff. Is Final Cut going to be like for free built in on it?
No, it's just that it runs.
Okay, yeah.
It's just already running on the new, like they have it running on an iPad processor.
Yeah. That's like
crazy.
I'm really curious too. Like, I don't know if this is when this starts to happen, but like I've already been saying for the longest time, like something like an iPad should be like an extension of an editing program. Like you should be able to, for example, just move around clips on the iPad, and then you just use your MacBook or whatever to do like the hard processing or whatever. I feel like it should all be integrated more, or maybe even your iPhone. Like, I don't know how that would, but like,
have you tried doing it with Sidecar at all?
I have a little bit, but it's still not the same because you can't move around clips and like split them. And none of that is in there. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it basically just gives you a touchscreen version of the same OS, right? Like you're not getting a different experience. It just puts it on a second screen.
Yeah, so I want to in the future, like I want a VR or AR experience of editing. I want to be able to sit in the park and just have like 15 screens up and like be moving around my arms like Minority Report styled editing. But like until we get to that, I think like something like an iPad is like the extension to make things a little bit easier and faster. Essentially could become a big trackpad touchscreen type thing. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with all of this stuff.
Have you used DaVinci at all, or are you not experimenting in that world?
I used to color grade when I would do freelance jobs and stuff. I would color grade a lot in DaVinci just because the color grading is incredible in DaVinci. But I've never forced myself to edit a bunch of videos in DaVinci. But I've heard a lot of good things, and it is free. So like, it's hard to beat free right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to kind of be the future in a lot of ways because of the freeness of it, because it can compete with the others. So many people are going to learn on it and then stick to it once they have a career. So even though, I don't use it either. Like I'm a Final Cut editor, but I think it's going to play a huge role moving forward. So
yeah, I recommend it to everybody who's like starting out, because I'm like, oh, you probably don't have money to spend on a program. And I so like, here's a free one. It's actually really good. Like if you're going to learn something, you might want to learn that.
Yeah, for sure. So what other projects do you have coming up now that you're hanging out at home like the rest of us? What's your plan for the next few months?
So I'm just kind of going with the flow right now. I did already have like a short film that me and my friend Jesse Senko were gonna shoot, and then Corona hit, and obviously everything is different now. But we are planning to do that next. I think it's gonna be a fun little project. I haven't shot a short film for a long time. And I'm really looking forward to traveling as soon as things get a little bit better. But right now everything's kind of on hold because we have another kid on the way. So
it's not bad. It's not bad timing for it in a way though, because you're already home, so you can spend family time's easier to find right now.
Yeah, we were like, we probably have to kind of stay at home and not travel at this point anyway. So it's fine. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of the next chapter. I think this feels like a new chapter for my channel, for my career. And then I have like, I'm working on, so one company that I've talked about now is We The Project, where it's a place for creatives to connect and then to find work for freelancers and stuff on there, We The Project. So I've been helping out with that, giving them a bunch of feedback and going through the designs and all that stuff. And now it's in beta. And then I have another company that me and my manager / partner, Tyler, are working on, but that's kind of more secretive right now. So like I have a bunch of side things too that I'm working on. So people may not realize this is like, I don't consider myself an artist at all. Like in school, I hated English and art class, and I would never take a photography class in high school. Like that would be the furthest thing from what I would want to do in high school. So my brain is really like logical, and I'm super business minded and all that stuff. So I feel like this YouTube channel and this platform has given me an opportunity to also dabble in all of that stuff. And constantly, my brother is a developer. He works for Shopify. We're always hanging out and thinking of like, what's the next thing we could do, or what could we work on together, or like, what are some problems that we could solve? So, yeah, I think it's just a really exciting time right now.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat in not thinking of what I do as artistry ever. And it's an argument that I had when I was, I didn't go to art school, I went to like technical college or whatever. So I was doing the tech side from the beginning, but there's an art school right beside it. So I had friends over there, and it was definitely an argument I had more than once about how much is like photography and art. And I just don't really think of it that way. I know that it can be, but it is more of an approach. Like if you have an artistic approach to filmmaking or photography, then that's something it can be, or it's almost even a business model. It's like, yeah, if you want to do fine art photography, that can be a way to try to build a business. It's a very, very challenging way, and a lot less people succeed at it. So if you approach these things in terms of a commercial endeavor, like commercial photography, commercial video production, you're more likely to find a career doing something you can love doing, even though it doesn't maybe sound as like creatively expressive, but it really can be. So
yeah, I kind of like I don't like going to an art museum and looking at paintings, but if I had like the painter or somebody telling me the story behind that painting, like what the meaning or purpose of it is, then I'm super interested. So like that's kind of the same thing with how I treat my videos and stuff. Like I don't want to make just like beautiful videos. I want there to be a purpose to it, or a point or a reason to it. And that's just the way my brain works.
Yeah, I get that. There's one other note I had of something else I wanted to talk about before I let you go. We both got, I think, maybe the same LG TV really recently, because you just posted a video about it. I haven't done a video yet.
Yeah.
And LG did send it to both of us, so just bear that in mind. But I've never had an amazing TV before, so like this is not sponsored, but like holy crap, having a big, really good OLED TV is really good. I don't know if it goes without saying, but like, were you blown away when you turned it on?
So I I actually, I'm like, I guess a year ahead of you. I bought LG OLED TV. It was one of the older ones. It was on sale. I was like, oh, this is a great price for the OLED. I think it was like $1,500, and previously it was so much more expensive. And I was like, I
Yeah, that's a good
appreciate
price.
movies and good TV shows so much that I want to make the experience like the best it can be. So I was like, I'm gonna buy a new TV and a new sound system. And I ended up going with the LG OLED TV, and like I love it. Like just yesterday, we watched the new Eurovision movie. On
Oh yeah,
Netflix.
we
Have
just
you-
watched that too. And then
It's incredible.
my wife's been playing the soundtrack on repeat in the car every day.
We literally played the soundtrack right after we watched the movie, eating dinner or whatever it was. It's incredible. And like, man, I was just watching it, and I just turned to my wife, and I'm like, oh, I appreciate this TV so much. So when LG was like, hey, like we noticed, like you don't have a TV at your office right now. Like, do you want one? I was like, heck yes. Like it changes things so much. Just like, especially coming from a filmmaker background. Like my eyes are really sensitive to colors and the way that things look, and I can tell when like this isn't the actual color grade, like this isn't how it's supposed to look. And that's what I had with my last, I forget what TV I even had. I think it might have been an older Samsung or something like that, and like the colors were just never accurate. They were never, I knew that this movie is supposed to be like a nice teal tone to it, and it's just like magenta, and I'm like, come on, like. And so yeah, I decided to finally splurge a little bit and get the LG OLED. And so yeah, I've been loving obviously this one too at the office.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to pull out my my hardware color calibrator and calibrate it like a proper monitor, just to get it as close as I can and see what it can really do. Because a lot of the reason I was excited about it was even to just watch my own YouTube videos on it. I was like, I just want to see what it looks like on the biggest, best possible screen. Like videos like your 1080 versus 4K video. It's so funny because like we spend so much time thinking about this stuff, and then we just watch it on our phones where it doesn't matter. You need a TV that, I mean, so yeah, mine's 65 inches, which it's so funny that's become a default size. Like that's pretty normal in the store, but it feels enormous. It feels so massive. Huge. Like it's a theater in your home. It's a home theater. But that you need something about that size at a normal viewing distance to even possibly perceive the difference between 1080 and 4K. And you can, so the best place to see it is especially like game content, because the edges are perfectly crisp, right? Like it's it's sharp. So then it becomes the most obvious I found. When it comes to video, I mean, if it's shot well, you may not know which one you're watching. I'm gonna do a little more testing, and I think that's the video I'll create about the TV is a bit more of an analysis of like what attributes of image quality actually matter from a filmmaker's perspective. Like when you're what does make the viewing experience better, and what is just sort of marketing and sugarcoating on top of it.
Yeah, it's funny, like like back in the day, at least, like 120 hertz was huge, 240 like, and like that didn't really actually mean much on a TV. Like it didn't make any difference.
Do you use the filmmaker mode when you're watching?
So I haven't like decided what I'm using, but a lot of the what is the Dolby Vision?
Yeah,
I think like that one, for example, it starts playing. I think it plays at like 30 frames per second or maybe or something. Like it changes the look of it. It's like that true motion or whatever they call it on different TVs. I hate, like my parents will always have that on. I'm like, oh no, I gotta turn this off right away. Like I can't have that. So yeah, it's interesting. Like things like I didn't care about 4K, for example, on my TV. I just wanted like really accurate colors. Like HDR is way more, I think, important to have like a good range of contrast versus what we've had before. Those things matter a lot more to me, I think, than like having it 4K. I'll take the 4K too, but
yeah, no, I mean, a good example, like one of the things that bothered me the most on my 1080 LG that I'm replacing with this is that in the LCD 1080 screen that I just got rid of, I could see a lot of glow in the blacks, especially in certain corners. So it wasn't just the contrast ratio. It's not just that the blacks weren't completely black, but it was unevenly black. Certain parts would just be a little hotter, and that is distracting. So maybe number one priority is I don't want to be distracted by something that isn't part of the viewing experience. Like, I want to be focused on what I'm watching, I don't want to be looking at the quality, basically. And if there's anything that takes you out of what the story is and what the image is, that's a detriment. So, again, it's not about
more.
like ultimate resolution, things like that. It's just not being distracted. So.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself. I mean, the only thing I'm maybe distracted by is like yesterday being like, dang, this looks so good.
I know, yeah. So there's one downside of as you put more effort into your home viewing experience, your mind can be thinking for a while about like, I wonder which settings I could change to make this look a little more accurate or a little better. And if I had a sound bar, then this blah, blah, like sometimes you can take yourself out of it by imagining every detail of like, did I tweak this exactly perfectly yet? Or could I make it 10% better? Which is not worth thinking about. just watch the movie.
Yeah, straight out of the box, even my older LG OLED TV, it just there aren't those same distractions like you're talking about. I just enjoy whatever the movie, TV show is, and like now I get the real like, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. I love it.
Maddie, I'm so glad that we could catch up and have this time to chat. Thanks for coming on.
This was great. Thanks so much for having me.